Have you ever wondered how one of the world's oldest civilizations lived their lives alongside the gods? How they celebrated, married, or even handled divorce? In this video, we take you on an extraordinary journey through the ancient Sumerian civilization. Discover their daily religious rituals, sacred festivals that shaped their culture, and the marriage and divorce traditions that reveal their advanced societal structure. From lunar celebrations to divine marriages, from daily acts of devotion to the laws governing family life, this is your chance to uncover the roots of many practices we know today. Join us as we explore the captivating world of the Sumerians and their timeless legacy. Sumerian periodic rituals, festivals, had older roots that extended to the Neolithic period, New Stone Age. However, this did not prevent these festivals from acquiring new spiritual and ritualistic significance. The four most important Sumerian festivals are: This is the weekly festival associated with the moon. The Sumerians relied on the moon for recording their history. The moon has 4 phases, and the Sumerians named each phase, assigning 7 days to each. The 7th day was called Esh Esh, meaning the day of celebrating the completion of one phase of the moon. This is precisely the origin of the concept of the weekend, and from it came the word Saturday, derived from the Babylonian word Sabbatu, meaning 7. On Saturday, people rested from work and celebrated the end of a new phase of the moon. From a mythological standpoint, the Sumerians believed that the new moon, dark moon, meant that evil spirits and demons attacked the moon and dragged it to the underworld, where it disappeared for 3 days. The myth of Enlil and Ninlil and the birth of the moon indicates the moon's connection with the underworld, albeit temporarily, and that it must emerge after being redeemed by offerings. Hence, the Esh Esh festivals were accompanied by sacrifices and offerings. Zamu is a Sumerian term, equivalent to the Akkadian Zag-Muk-Ka, and it refers to a seasonal festival that represents the new year. The Sumerians celebrated this festival twice. The first was during the spring equinox, called the First Zamu Festival, a festival of harvest and greenery. It was celebrated with the marriage of the gods Dumuzi and Inanna and sacred marriage rituals, specifically on March 21st of each year, marking the start of the Sumerian year. The second festival, the Second Zamu Festival, took place during the autumn equinox. It was a collective mourning ceremony for the death of Dumuzi and his descent to the underworld, celebrated on September 21st each year. It seems that the Sumerian Akitu festival was associated with the deities Inanna and Dumuzi, with many sacrifices offered to Inanna on the 11th day of the festival, which began on the first day of the Akitu month. Therefore, we can assume that the 12-day festival of Akitu in Babylon originated from the Sumerian Akitu. It's well known how this festival was celebrated in Babylon, where the rituals centered around Marduk and the renewal of the Babylonian king's sovereignty. From texts dating back to the Old Babylonian period, we can detect the essence of the first Akitu festival in Ur or Sumer, which was rooted in the first Zamu festival, a spring festival involving offerings of food to the god Nanna and celebrations with his wife, the goddess Ningal. This reflects the replacement of Dumuzi and Inanna with the local gods of the city. The second Akitu festival in the autumn involved the moon's disappearance in its boat in the underworld, followed by mourning, a city procession, and finally the Torch Festival, marking the end of the sorrowful celebration of the god's temporary death. This reveals the missing link between the Sumerian Akitu festival and the Babylonian Akitu festival. It seems that the joyous spring rituals in Sumer for Dumuzi and Inanna were later transferred to the gods and goddesses of the cities, especially after or during the 3rd dynasty of Ur. Likewise, the autumn mourning rituals became associated with the moon god Nanna, the god of Ur, and his wife Ningal, because of the temporary absence, 3 days, of the moon god in the underworld, which represented the time between its disappearance at the end of the lunar month and its reappearance at the start of the next month. This laid the foundation for transferring the tradition to Marduk, the god of Babylon, whose myth also involved his disappearance in the underworld for 3 days or a short period. This entire mythical narrative was appropriate for placing the Sumerian and then Babylonian king at the center of it, representing Sin or Marduk, much as Dumuzi had been during early Sumerian times. At this point, the Akitu festival became more complex, evolving into a celebration of the king's coronation and his sacred marriage, with a mythical background referencing Marduk and the story of creation. Ma Festival. This great festival was mentioned in some Sumerian tablets and was sometimes mixed with the Spring Festival. The Sumerians were a deeply religious people, showing profound reverence for the gods and a strong sense of morality. Their daily religious rituals were a testament to their piety, not only to the gods and priests, but also to themselves. The daily rituals were not just those performed every day, but included traditional and common religious ceremonies. In this video, we will explore these rituals and how they were performed. Ablution and bathing. Ablution was a necessary ritual for the Sumerians, not only for prayer, but for any religious activity. It was accompanied by various religious utterances. Ablution seemed to be limited to washing the hands, using a ceremonial basin called abzu, found in most Sumerian temples, such as in Eridu and Lagash. The basin was connected to running water channels outside the temple. It is believed that ablution was a religious practice to draw near to the god Enki, the god of water, wisdom, and creator of humans. Touching his water to the human body was considered a purification and recreation of the body. Prayer. There is no evidence that Sumerian prayers were performed daily and at specific times. Sumerian prayers seem to be extemporaneous supplications directed to a specific god, recited in temples, homes, palaces, or elsewhere. Prayers differ from hymns as they are pleas to the god and are not accompanied by music, while hymns are praises to the god often performed with musical instruments. Prayers could be conducted with a priest or alone by the worshipper in front of a god's statue. Prayers were often accompanied by specific rituals and gestures indicating the worshipper's reverence and the offerings they presented, varying according to time and place. The content of the prayers included priestly words and offered a mythological experience to the worshipper, focusing on requests and thanksgiving. The fasting. Religious abstention from certain types of food was a form of fasting practiced by the Sumerians. Priests, possibly for economic reasons, would recommend abstaining from certain meats, fruits, or vegetables for a specified time, framed with religious or mythological justifications. The hymns. Hymns were ritualistic, often performed with musical accompaniment. The Sumerians called hymns shur. Hymns varied in length, some not religious, particularly those dedicated to kings. Hymns differed from prayers and spells as they were spiritual songs reflecting on the god's qualities and invoking blessings, whereas prayers were specific requests for health, success, or justice. Spells were ritual texts to expel demons by invoking the god and good spirits. Sumerian hymns were divided into priestly and royal hymns. Priestly hymns glorified the great Sumerian gods, while royal hymns praised kings and their deeds, often including praise for a specific god. Hymns were performed with known melodies and musical rhythms, with instruments like drums, tambourines, and lyres, often accompanied by temple dancers. Purification. Purification involved burning incense, pouring liquids like water and oil, burning and burying objects, washing and making sacrifices. Purification was based on the belief that humans and places were surrounded by evil spirits. To connect with the sacred, materials symbolizing the gods were used for purification. Water and oil represented the god Enki, fire represented the god Nusku, and libations and sacrifices represented the god Shulshaka, son of the god Ninkursu. Burial referred to the god Dumuzi, and burning symbolized the god Utu's connection to fire and the underworld. Incense burning. Daily incense burning was a ritual performed in temples by purified priests and other priests, like the exorcist, Ashipu, who used incense, particularly harmal, believed to expel evil spirits by filling the space and driving them out through doors and windows. Temples had high altars for incense, with a place resembling a stove where incense was burned daily or during other rituals. Special incense containers were held by priests during exorcism rituals. Pouring liquids. Besides incense, pouring liquids like water and oil was a method of purification and expelling spirits. Oil was specifically poured on the bride's head during weddings, possibly accompanied by washing, mentioned in the reforms of Urukagina. Pouring oil and anointing were also done during the king's coronation, using a special vessel for sacred water. Ritual of opening and washing the god's mouth. This ritual bestowed life upon new statues of gods. It involved placing jars of sacred water, red and white cloths beside the statue, offering sacrifices, washing the statue's mouth with specific herbs, cedar sticks, cloth, salt, cedar resin, fats, precious stones, butter and syrup, and reciting ritual phrases. The priest would lead a ram with the statue to the riverbank, placing the statue on a reed mat facing east under a canopy, offering sacrifices again, pouring beer, slaughtering the ram, placing a fish and a turtle of gold and silver, a bronze axe, and a copper tong inside the ram's skin, and casting these into the river, accompanied by ritual phrases. The statue was then placed in the designated temple, completing the ritual of giving life and spirit to the statue made by craftsmen. Feeding the gods. Priests responsible for god statues performed this ritual daily, offering various foods to the gods. There were two main meals, one around noon and a secondary one before closing the temple. Priests provided food from temple offerings, sourced from the best agricultural fields, orchards, and livestock. These offerings also fed the temple's priests and workers. A table in front of the god statue would hold vessels with water, drinks, food slices, and fruits. Often the food would be given to the king afterward to bless him or signify the connection between the god and the king. Substitute ritual. This ritual involved transferring a person's misfortune to another through direct or symbolic contact. The substitute could be chosen by the afflicted person or their priest, and contact rituals were rare. Indirect rituals, symbolic, were more common, using a doll made of dough, clay, wax, or wood, representing the enemy to transfer the misfortune, for example, illness. The doll was kept near the patient, then cast into water with a magical incantation, Namburbu. Sometimes, animals were used as substitutes. The patient would keep a goat kid beside them overnight before the ritual. The next day, a grave-like pit was dug where the patient and the goat kid were laid, with a symbolic and actual slaughter performed. The goat's body was treated with respect, washed, perfumed, and wrapped in the patient's clothes. The priest would recite a mourning prayer, declaring the goat's death, symbolizing the patient's recovery. Funeral meals were offered to the goddess Ereshkigal to honor and pacify her, followed by the goat's burial, symbolizing the burial of the now healed patient. These rituals combined contact, animal contact, and similarity, simultaneous slaughter, exchanged clothes, respectful treatment of the goat's body, and death declaration. Sacrifices. Sumerian ritual sacrifices varied between plant and animal offerings. Plant sacrifices were frequently offered to temples, including fruits, while animal sacrifices included bulls, cattle, goats, deer, fish, pigs, and birds. Animal offerings were linked to the god's animal symbol, Enlil's bull, Nanshi's fish, and Ninurta's horses. And in conclusion, we see how the Sumerians lived lives filled with piety and deep respect for their gods. Through their daily rituals such as ablutions, prayers, fasting, and purification, they sought to balance the demands of the self with the dictates of nature, avoiding sin and drawing closer to the gods. These rituals are reflected in the details of their religious life, representing a blend of deep faith and spiritual philosophy, where every element of nature and ritual played a role in cleansing the individual and elevating their spirit. In Sumerian, a teenage girl before marriage was called Kisikil Tur, and in Akkadian, she was known as Betultu, meaning virgin or maiden. An adult girl was referred to as Kisikil. The Sumerians used the term Namdam-si for marriage, and in Akkadian, it was Akazu, meaning to take. Although the Sumerians encouraged early marriage, it was not favored to marry very young girls. Marriage procedures began with obtaining the consent of the girl's father and mother, especially when the groom was a youth, marked by the appearance of facial hair. In the later Sumerian period, the groom's father would swear an oath in the name of the king before priests and witnesses, saying, "May my son and rightful heir marry so-and-so, daughter of so-and-so." The ceremonies were conducted by a religious priest. The approval of both parents was essential, followed by a verbal agreement and a feast. The woman would then become a lawful wife, with this formalized by the payment of the bride price and gifts, referred to as nigdiah by the Sumerians. These included foodstuffs such as grains, meat, butter, dates, and fruit, delivered to the bride's house in dishes. The formal marriage contract, known in Sumerian as kakesda, was crucial, and marriage could not proceed without it. It was often written by the groom and kept by the bride to ensure the rights of any legitimate children, recorded on a small clay tablet. A model of written contracts in Sumerian from the reign of King Samsu-Iluna, 1749–1712 BCE, indicates that the bride paid the bride price, which she could reclaim along with the dowry if divorced by her husband. Conversely, if she initiated the divorce, she lost the bride price and had to pay the dowry to her husband. There is an unconfirmed tradition from the time of Urukagina, 24th century BCE, suggesting that women could marry more than one man simultaneously, but Urukagina prohibited this and mandated monogamy. It appears that marriage was performed by a priest who poured oil on the heads of the bride and groom, who then paid a specified amount to the priest. There were detailed rules regarding marriage to a deceased brother's widow, stepmothers, acquiring concubines, adoption, inheritance, and various forms of marriage including marriage by cohabitation, purchase, and unilateral marriage. Divorce was known since the early dynastic period and involved the relinquishment of rights by either the husband or wife upon separation. Urukagina's reforms mentioned that before his time, a man wishing to divorce his wife had to pay 5 shekels of silver to the governor and 1 shekel to the chief minister, implying that the man needed the approval of authorities before divorcing. A wife could divorce her husband in rare and specific cases, and divorce was called tag in Sumerian. Sumerian laws did not prevent a husband from divorcing a wife who had children, but they placed certain conditions to balance his will with his responsibility to ensure the support of his ex-wife and children. For example, a provision in the law of Esh Esh stated that if a man divorced his wife after having children and took a second wife, he would be expelled from his home and sever all ties with his property. On the other hand, divorce from a barren wife was relatively easy and acceptable. A wife could divorce her husband if she could prove his misconduct and involvement in forbidden acts. A Sumerian text illustrates this. After the husband had given the marriage gifts and performed the marriage rites, pouring oil, the wife filed a complaint with the city priests, accusing her husband of engaging in homosexual acts. After she proved to the judges that she had seen her husband with another man, the judges, on behalf of the king, shaved the husband's head, pierced his nose, and paraded him in disgrace. The wife received her dowry from the husband's possessions and left him. Thank you for watching. We hope you found this exploration of Sumerian marriage and divorce practices insightful. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with others who might find it interesting. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more content on ancient civilizations.